The soul's progress. A very important point in the Rosicrucian teachings is that in which we are informed that the evolution of man is not confined to this planet, the Earth, but rather is extended to a chain of 7 planets. The Rosicrucians teach that the evolutionary processes of this planet are linked with and blended into the evolutionary processes of 6 other planets, and that life on this planet is likewise linked with and blended into the life on the 6 other planets of our planetary chain. The Rosicrucians teach that these 7 planets of our planetary chain are closely linked and connected by subtle etheric forces, and that there is a constant etheric current passing from one to the others and flowing even ever through the entire circuit. These connected planets constitute the chain of worlds, which is a series of homes of the individual soul, and the circuit of which is traveled by all individual souls. Not only does each individual soul now on Earth reincarnate a number of times on this planet, but in the course of the ages it progresses to the next highest planet, just as in ages past it has progressed from the next lowest one. And this round of the chain of planets has been made several times by the human race in some form of existence, and will be made again several times. The planets of this chain of worlds are not identical in composition and nature with the Earth. On the contrary, there is a wide difference between the several planets in this respect. The Earth is not the highest in development in this chain, but on the contrary is far down on the scale, although there are others still lower. The progress of the souls around this chain of worlds, however, is not merely like a circle in which the soul travels from the lowest to the highest, but is rather according to the plan of the spiral in which the journey always returns to the starting point, but on a higher plane of activity. The journey of the life forms from world to world has been in progress since the beginning of the present world period, and was made by the lower forms of life as they climbed the spiral stairway of evolution. A writer on the subject has said of this point, "If the spiral character of the progress accomplished by the life impulses that develop the various kingdoms of nature, which accounts..." It is the spiral character of the progress accomplished by the life impulses that develop the... I've lost my place again. I'm going to do it again. It is the spiral character of the progress accomplished by the life impulses that develop the various kingdoms of nature, which accounts for the gaps now observed in the animated forms which people the earth. The thread of a screw, which is a uniform inclined plane, in reality looks like a succession of steps when examined only along one line parallel to its axis. The spiritual monads which are coming round the system on the animal level pass on to other worlds when they have performed their turn of animal incarnation here. By the time they come again, they are ready for human incarnation, and there is no necessity now for the upward development of animal forms into human forms. These are already waiting for their spiritual tenants. But if we go back far enough, we come to a period at which there were no human forms ready developed on the earth, when spiritual monads traveling on the earliest or lowest human level were thus beginning to come round. Their onward pressure in the world at that time, containing none but animal forms, provoked the improvement of the highest of these into the required form, the much talked of missing link. The impulse to the new evolution of higher forms is really given by rushes of spiritual monads coming around the cycle in a state fit for the inhabitation of new forms. These superior life impulses burst the chrysalis of the older form, on the planet they invade and throw off an effervescence of something higher. The forms which have gone on merely repeating themselves for millenniums start afresh into growth. With relative rapidity, they rise through the intermediate into the higher forms, and then, as these in turn are multiplied with the vigor and rapidity of all new growths, they supply tenements of flesh for the spiritual entities coming round on that stage or plane of existence, and for the immediate forms there are no longer any tenants offering. Inevitably, they become extinct. The writer, also above quoted, also points out a very important point in the progress of the life forms from the world to world as follows. The tide of life, the wave of existence, the spiritual impulse, call it by what name we please, passes on from planet to planet by rushes or gushes, not by an even, continuous flow. For the momentary purpose of illustrating the ideal in hand, the process may be compared to the filling of a series of holes or tubs sunk in the ground, such as may sometimes be seen at the mouths of feeble springs, and connected with each other by little surface channels. The stream from the spring, as it flows, is gathered up entirely in the beginning by the first hole, or tub, A, and it is only when this is quite full that the continued inpouring of water from the spring causes that which it already contains to overflow into tub B. This in turn fills and overflows along the channel which leads to tub C, and so on. It is manifest from what we have already said, and in order that the progress of organisms on globe A shall be accounted for, that the mineral kingdom will more likely develop the vegetable kingdom on globe A until it receives an impulse from without, that the earth was able to develop man from the ape till it received its impulse from without. The full development of the mineral epoch, or globe A, prepares the way for the vegetable development, and as soon as this begins, the mineral life impulse overflows into globe B. Then when the vegetable development on globe A is complete and the animal development begins, the vegetable life impulse overflows on globe B and the mineral impulse passes on to globe C. Then finally comes the human impulse on globe A. It is necessary at this point to guard against one's misconception that might arise. There is a fact to be stated which has such an influence on the course of events that when it is realized, it will be seen that the life impulse has passed several times around the whole chain of worlds before the commencement of the human impulse on globe A. This fact is as follows. Each kingdom of evolution, vegetable, animal, and so on, is divided into several spiral layers. The spiritual monads, the individual atoms of that immense life impulse of which so much has been said, do not fully complete their mineral existence on globe A, then completed on globe B, and so on. They pass several times around the whole circle as minerals, and then again several times round as vegetables, and several times as animals. Now, leaving behind us the consideration of the details of the progress of the lower life forms, let us consider the details of the progress of the human race. It has been said that the great wave of human life forms flows around the planetary chain in great waves, in successive waves of progress. The successive waves are known by occultists under the name of rounds. But according to the rule, as is the great, so is the small, we find a corresponding series of spirals in the progress of the human race during each of several sojourns on the earth. That is to say, an individual soul arriving on earth in one of the rounds does not merely live out its life here and then pass on to the next planet. On the contrary, it lives a number of lives on this planet and among several races. There exists a spiral of races in earth life, through which the individual soul must live and work its way. The number of these races is, of course, 7, for 7 is the number manifest in all of the great occult processes of the cosmos. There are 7 great rounds of human progress around the chain of worlds, and in each round there are 7 races in which the individual must manifest. The present round of the human race is the 4th. Each of the 7 races of the present 4th round of the race occupies the earth for a great period of time. The majority of the human race now on earth belongs to the 5th race, though there are some stragglers from the 4th race still dwelling on the earth. Each of these 7 great races of humanity are subdivided into 7 sub-races, and each sub-race is divided into 7 branches. The period during which each great root race of the human race flourishes on earth is sharply marked off from that of the one succeeding it by great convulsions of nature, which destroy practically all traces of the preceding civilization, and which leave but few survivors thereof. A writer has said of this point of the occult teachings, the periods of the great root races are divided from each other by great convulsions of nature and by great geological changes. Europe was not in existence as a continent at the time the 4th race flourished. The continent on which the 4th race lived was not in existence at the time the 3rd race flourished, and neither of the continents which were the great vortices of the civilizations of those 2 races are in existence now. 7 great continental cataclysms occur during the occupation of the earth by the human life wave for one round period. Each race is cut off in this way at its appointed time, some survivors remaining in parts of the world, not the proper home of their race, but these invariably in such cases exhibiting a tendency to decay and relapsing into barbarism with more or less rapidity. The individuals of the first race of the present 4th round of the human race on earth ranged from a gross type scarcely above the brutes up to a very barbarous type. These higher types reincarnated later as the higher individuals of the second race, the lower types of the first race constituting the lower subdivisions of the second race. The rule being that the less advanced souls of any race incarnate as the lowest types of the next and higher race. The Rosicrucians' teachings have but comparatively little to say concerning the history of the peoples of the first race and the second race. But from what is taught, it may be gathered that these people were of a very low order of humanity. The types which we know as the cave dwellers, the Stone Age people, and the Fire people give us the nearest possible idea of what these first race and second race people must have been like. There was apparently little or nothing of what we call civilization among these people, and they were apparently about on a level with the lowest types known among mankind on earth today. The teachings, however, state that there were a few comparatively highly advanced souls in the latter days of the second race, who acted as the leaven for the great improvement which came with the third race. The era of the second race terminated, as usual, with a cataclysm which destroyed the majority of the race and which scattered its survivors among far distant lands. Then dawned the period of the third race, the seed of its greatest activity being laid in the continent of Lemuria, which was situated on that portion of the globe which now lies at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean and parts of the Indian Ocean. The continent of Lemuria also included Australia, Australasia, and other Pacific islands. These surviving portions being really the highest points of the continents of Lemuria, the lower portions of which were sunk beneath the waves ages ago. A writer says of the character of the civilization of Lemuria, Life in Lemuria is described as being principally concerned with the physical senses and sensual enjoyment, only a few developed souls having broken through the fetters of materiality and reached the beginning of the mental and spiritual planes of life. Some few indeed made great progress and were saved from the general wreck in order to become the leaven which would lighten the mass of mankind during the next great cycle. These developed souls were the teachers of the new races and were looked upon by the latter as gods and supernatural beings, and legends and traditions concerning them are still existent among the ancient people of our present day. Many of the myths of the ancient peoples arose in this way. The traditions are that just prior to the Great Cataclysm, which destroyed the people of the third race, there was a body of the chosen ones which migrated from Lemuria to certain islands of the sea, which are now part of the mainland of India. These people formed the nucleus of the occult teachers of Lemuria, and they kept alight the flame of truth with which was lighted the torches of the fourth race, the race of the Atlanteans. With the passing away of Lemuria, the home of the third race, there arose from the depths of the Atlantic Ocean the future home of the people of the fourth race, the continent of Atlantis. Atlantis was situated in the space now occupied by a portion of the Atlantic Ocean, beginning at what is now known as the Caribbean Sea, and extending over to the region now known as Africa. What we now know as Cuba and the West Indies were the highest points of the continent of Atlantis, the lower portions being now buried beneath the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. The writer above quoted from says of the civilization of Atlantis, "The civilization of Atlantis was remarkable, and its people attained heights which seem almost incredible to even those familiar with the highest achievements of man in our times. The chosen ones, preserved from the cataclysm which destroyed Lemuria, and who lived to a remarkably old age, had stored up within their minds the wisdom and learning of the civilizations which had been destroyed, and they thus gave the Atlanteans an enormous advantage at the start. They soon attained great advancement along all the lines of human endeavor. They perfected mechanical inventions and appliances, reaching far ahead of even our present attainments. In the field of electricity especially, they reached the stages that our present race will reach not sooner than 200 or 300 years from now. Along the line of occult attainment, their progress was far beyond the dreams of the average man of our own race, and in fact, from this arose one of the causes of their downfall. For they prostituted the power of base and selfish uses, and practiced black magic. And so the decline of Atlantis began, and the end did not come at once or suddenly, it was gradual. The continent and the surrounding islands gradually sunk beneath the waves of the Atlantic Ocean, the process occupying 10,000 years. The Greeks and Romans of our own cycle had traditions regarding the sinking of the continent, but their knowledge referred only to the disappearance of the small remainder, certain islands, the continent itself having disappeared thousands of years before their time. It is recorded that the Egyptian priests had traditions that the continent itself had disappeared 9,000 years before their time. As in the case of the chosen ones of Lemuria, so was it with the elect ones of Atlantis, who were taken away from the doomed land some time prior to its destruction. These advanced individuals of the race left their Atlantean homes, and led by the Spirit migrated to portions of what are now known as South America and Central America, then but islands of the sea. These people left the traces of their civilization in these lands, and our scientists discovering these wonders greatly at the evidences of the high culture shown in them. When the fifth race appeared, These brave and advanced souls became the teachers of the new race and were afterwards remembered as gods and the heroes of mythology. The fifth race evolved rapidly owing to the urge of the souls of the Atlanteans pressing forward for re-embodiment, and human forms were born to supply the demand. The fertility of the new race began marked. The writer previously referred to says of the survival of members of a disappearing race and their influence on the life of the new race. By means of the catechism, the races of each cycle were wiped out when their time came, but the few elect or chosen ones, that is, those who had manifested the right to become torchbearers, were carried away to some favorable environment where they became as leaven to the mass, as gods to the new races that quickly appeared. It must be noted, however, that the chosen or elect ones were not the only ones saved from the destructions that overtook the majority of the race in those catechisms. On the contrary, a few survivors were preserved, although driven away from their former homes and reduced to first principles of living in order to become the parents of the new race. The new races springing from the fittest of the survivors quickly formed subraces, being composed of the better adapted souls seeking reincarnation, while the less fit sank into barbarism and showed evidences of decay. A remnant of these degraded human creatures, however, persist in incarnation for thousands of years, being composed of these souls not sufficiently advanced to take part in the life of the new races. These leftovers are in evidence in our own times in the cases of the Australian savages, the African bushmen, and the Digger Indians, and others of a similar low order of development. In order to understand the advance of each race, it must be remembered that the more advanced souls, after passing out of the body, have a much longer period of rest in the higher planes, and consequently do not present themselves for reincarnation until a period quite late as compared with the hasty reincarnation of the less advanced souls, who are hurried back to rebirth by reason of the strong earthly attachment and desires. In this way it happens that the earlier races of each cycle are more primitive folk than those who follow them as the years roll by. The soul of an earthbound person reincarnates in a few years and sometimes in a few days, while the soul of an advanced man may repose and rest on the higher plane for centuries, nay, even for thousands of years, until the earth has reached a stage in which the appropriate environment may be afforded it. In the beginning of the period of the fifth race, the present race of man, there were born not only the beginning of the new subraces which always spring into existence at the beginning of a new cycle, but there were also born the descendants of the elect, saved from the destruction of Atlantis by having been led away from the scene of danger. The new races were the descendants of the scattered survivors of the Atlantean people, that is, of the common run of those people. But the elect few were superior individuals of their race and imparted to their descendants their knowledge and wisdom. By an understanding of this distinction, we are able to comprehend the fact that at the same time there existed hordes of people of the new races, more or less primitive and ignorant, and at other places certain advanced people, like the ancient Egyptians, Persians, Chaldeans, Hindus. These advanced peoples represented the advanced souls, the old souls of the advanced individuals of the Lemurian and Atlantean civilizations. And I will continue on in the next video.